The village of Umwekwe had always been a tranquil habitation. Life there moved slowly, with the mornings spent in the fields, the afternoons in rest, and the evenings, villagers gathered around small fires as families shared stories passed down through generations. Nothing ever really changed in Umwekwe, and that's why the arrival of Pastor Kunle came with so much excitement. Pastor Kunle appeared one Sunday morning, just as the villagers were finishing their usual weekly market. He was a tall man, broad shouldered, and handsome in his own way, with a voice that seemed to carry authority. Dressed in a suit, holding a large Bible in one hand, he walked into the heart of the village and raised his hand as if to bless the land. People stopped to watch him, intrigued by the stranger's presence. God has sent me to bring salvation to this village, Pastor Kunle announced in a deep, booming voice. His words echoed around the square, and heads turned towards him. The people of Umwekwe had never seen a pastor like this before. His confidence, his presence, everything about him seemed larger than life. Slowly, people gathered around, curious about what he had to say. The village had a small church, but it was nothing grand, just a simple structure where elders led prayers on Sundays. But Pastor Kunle was different. He spoke of miracles, of the power of God to break chains, heal sickness, and bring prosperity. His passion was contagious. He told them that God had revealed to him that their village was chosen for great things. The people were in awe. Within a week, Pastor Kunle had set up a tent in the village square. He called it the House of Glory. Every Sunday, more people came to hear him preach. The songs of praise echoed through the air, and his voice, strong and persuasive, filled the hearts of the villagers with hope. They believed that their lives would be transformed. His charisma and charm were undeniable. He knew how to speak to the people's struggles, offering them words of encouragement and hope. He promised healing for the sick, breakthroughs for the poor, and blessings for those who served God. And the villagers, desperate for change, embraced him fully. As the weeks went by, his influence grew. Pastor Kunle became a figure of respect, and people began seeking him out for personal prayers. His words felt like they had power, and the more time they spent with him, the more they trusted him. Soon, it wasn't just the elders or men of the village who came to him for guidance. Young women, too, were drawn to his powerful sermons and warm smile. But while everyone saw him as a man of God who would change their fortune, no one suspected the darkness hidden behind his charming exterior. The transformation Pastor Kunle brought to Umwekwe was undeniable. Within months, his congregation grew, attracting villagers from nearby communities who came to see the charismatic man of God. The church services were lively, filled with songs, clapping, and testimonies of healing. It wasn't long before his popularity spread beyond Umwekwe. The pastor's charm extended beyond the pulpit. After each service, he would spend time talking to the women, especially the young ladies. His voice was soft, yet powerful. His words were always kind and encouraging, making each one of them feel special, like they had a direct connection to God through him. Sister Amaka, he would say, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder, God has great plans for you. You are destined for greatness. Amaka would blush, feeling the warmth of his words. She wasn't the only one. Other young women in the church also received special attention from the pastor. He had a way of making them feel seen and important. Some whispered among themselves about how Pastor Kunle had always seemed to favor young sisters in the church, but no one dared to speak against him. After all, he was a man of God sent to the village to bring blessings and prosperity. The more time he spent with the women, the closer he got to know them. He would invite them for private prayers, telling them that they needed deliverance from spiritual attacks. Most of these women were struggling with one thing or another: unemployment, failed relationships, or family issues. They trusted him completely, believing that he could intercede on their behalf. The special prayers often took place in his private quarters behind the church. There, he would speak in hushed tones, telling them about the visions God has shown him. He would tell them that they were under spiritual oppression and that they only needed prayers that could free them. Soon, it wasn't just prayers that he offered. He began to hint at something deeper. He told the women that God had given him a special anointing, one that was beyond the understanding of the average believer. He claimed that his body was a vessel of divine power and that only through intimacy with him could the full blessings of God be unlocked. At first, the young women were confused, unsure of what he meant, but Pastor Kunle had a way of twisting his words to sound holy. He told them that their faith needed to be tested and that God had chosen them to receive his special blessings. He wrapped his deceit in religious language, making it difficult for them to question his intentions. For many, the pastor's words were like a lifeline. They had come to trust him so deeply that even the most absurd claims seemed believable. Pastor Kunle's grip on the young women in the church was growing stronger with each passing day. It was on a fateful Sunday that Pastor Kunle made an announcement that would change everything. After his usual sermon, he stood before the congregation with an expression of deep concern. His voice was filled with urgency as he said, "The Lord has revealed to me that many of the sisters in this church are under spiritual attack. There are forces of darkness holding you back from receiving your blessings." A hush fell over the church. The women exchanged nervous glances, wondering who among them was under the attack. Pastor Kunle continued, "But do not fear. God has given me the power to break these chains. I will be holding a special deliverance session, but it is only for sisters in the church." Immediately, whispers spread through the congregation. A deliverance session exclusively for women? This was unheard of, but Pastor Kunle's words were compelling, and the women trusted him. Many of them were desperate to receive the blessings he often spoke about: financial breakthroughs, successful marriages, and healing from illnesses. They believed that this deliverance session was their chance to unlock those blessings. After the service, several of the young women approached him to ask for more details. Pastor Kunle said, "My dear sisters, God has chosen you for a special purpose, but the enemy has been trying to stop your blessings. The deliverance will remove every obstacle in your path." The young women, eager to be free from their struggles, agreed to attend the session. They had no idea that they were walking into a trap. Pastor Kunle carefully selected the women who would attend, making it clear that the session was private and should not be discussed with others. In the days leading up to the deliverance session, the women prepared themselves spiritually, fasting and praying, just as Pastor Kunle instructed them. They believed that they were about to experience a breakthrough and that their lives were about to change forever. The deliverance session was held late in the evening, in a dimly lit room behind the church. The women, filled with anticipation, gathered quietly. Pastor Kunle stood at the front of the room, his face serious and his voice was low. He began with prayers, asking for God's guidance and protection. Then he began to reveal his true intentions. He told the young women that their problems were caused by spiritual blockages and that by being close to him, intimately close, could those blockages be removed. He claimed that God had given him a special anointing and that his body carried a divine power. To the women's shock, he told them that they needed to share that intimacy with him to receive their blessings. As the evening deepened, the atmosphere in the dimly lit room became thick with tension. The young women, all gathered for what they believed was a special deliverance session, sat in a circle around Pastor Kunle. The flickering candlelight cast shadows on their faces, revealing the anxiety on their faces. Pastor Kunle began to pray fervently, his voice rising and falling like the wind. He called upon divine powers, making each woman feel as if they were part of something monumental. They closed their eyes, their hands clasped together, and their hearts filled with hope. Little did they know that the very man they trusted was weaving a web of deceit around them. As he continued, he shifted his focus from prayers to personal revelations. "Sisters," he said, his tone was now intimate, "I see in the spirit that many of you have been struggling with deep-seated issues. You need cleansing, and I am the vessel God has chosen for this purpose." His eyes were locked onto each of them. His gaze was penetrating, but this deliverance requires a deeper connection, one that only I can facilitate. The sisters were confused. They had come for healing, not to be entangled in something they didn't understand. But the way Pastor Kunle spoke, with such authority and conviction, it made it hard for them to question him. Trust me, he continued, leaning closer. God's anointing flows through me, and those who connect with me will receive blessings beyond their wildest dreams. This isn't just a deliverance session, it's an opportunity to embrace your destiny. Some of the women hesitated. Their instincts told them it was wrong. Yet the lure of his promises was strong. They had all witnessed the change he had brought to the village, the new church, the community gatherings, and the testimonies of miracles. How could they not trust a man who claimed to speak for God? After so much manipulation, Pastor Kunle had succeeded in bending their will. One by one, he drew them into his twisted plan. The first woman to succumb was Ada. Her eyes was wide with anticipation. "I'm ready," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, trembling with both fear and desire. The others soon followed, driven by the longing for a brighter future. With every encounter, Kunle's control tightened. He warned them about the consequences of revealing their intimacy to anyone outside the circle. "If you speak of this, the enemy will attack you," he said ominously. "You must protect this sacred bond." His words instilled fear, ensuring that they remained silent. As time went by, Pastor Kunle's influence only grew stronger. The women continued to visit him. He preached about the blessings they would receive. He promised that their lives would be transformed if they keep giving him their bodies. The idea of fame and fortune became a distant dream, but it was a dream they clung to, even as reality began to set in. One by one, the young women fell deeper into his web, unable to see the destruction that lay ahead. Their spirit, that was once filled with hope, were now overshadowed by a growing sense of confusion. They felt trapped, yet the chains were invisible, tightening with each whispered promise from Pastor Kunle. As time went by, the reality of their situation began to dawn on the women of Umwekwe. The promises of fame and fortune they had once held close began to fade like a distant memory. Many had expected their lives to transform dramatically, but instead they found themselves entangled in a web of deceit and fear. Hadassah, a spirited young woman, began to notice the changes in her friends. They appeared more withdrawn, their laughter replaced by worried glances and hushed conversations. One evening, as they gathered to share a meal, she sensed the tension in the air. "What's wrong?" she asked, looking around the table. "We used to dream together. What happened?" The other women exchanged glances. Their eyes were filled with unspoken fears. Finally, one of them, Ngozi, spoke up. "I feel trapped, Hadassah. We thought this was a blessing, but it feels like a curse. I'm afraid of what he might do if we say anything." Hadassah's heart sank. She had initially been drawn to Pastor Kunle's charismatic personality and the hope he had sparked within the community. But as time went on, she suspected something was terribly wrong. "We need to talk to someone," she urged. "We can't keep living like this." But the others shook their heads in fear. "If we speak out, he will make sure we pay for it." Ada whispered, her voice trembling. "He's powerful, Hadassah. We don't know what he's capable of." The fear that enveloped them became suffocating. The pastor had instilled fear in their hearts. He frequently reminded them of the spiritual dangers lurking outside, waiting to attack those who dared to question his authority. "You'll be marked," he would say authoritatively, "and the enemy will ensure you never find peace." The weeks went by, and with each passing day, the women felt their spirits eroding. Hadassah watched as her friends' dreams began to fade, their hopes dimmed by the pastor's deceit. The promise of fame and blessings had turned into a bitter pill they were forced to swallow. Meanwhile, rumors began to circulate in the village. The young men of Umwekwe noticed the change in the women. Hadassah was so concerned. One evening, she decided to take a walk through the village, hoping to clear her mind. As she strolled past the church, she saw Pastor Kunle standing outside, laughing and chatting with a group of young women. His charm was undeniable, and he radiated an aura of confidence that seemed to draw them in like moths to a flame. But as she watched from a distance, Hadassah felt a surge of anger and determination. She couldn't allow this to continue. The village deserved to know the truth. But how could she confront him? The pastor had a hold over the women, and she feared the repercussions of standing up against him. That night, as Hadassah lay in bed, her mind raced with thoughts. She couldn't let fear silence her any longer. It was time to find her voice and expose the darkness that had invaded their lives. But she knew she would not be able to do it alone. The young ladies with Hadassah decided to gather evidences of Pastor Kunle's deceitful actions. They met regularly by the river, where their conversations were filled with whispered plans. Hadassah, now their unofficial leader, suggested that they document their experiences, noting down each interaction with the pastor. As the sun set over Umwekwe, they polled their memories. Each woman shared their story, recalling the moment when Pastor Kunle's manipulations became evident. They noted the false promises he had made and the fear he instilled in them. Ada recalled how he warned her against speaking out, saying the enemy will strike you down if you reveal our secret. The others nodded, sharing similar experiences. They also decided to discreetly speak with others in the village who had left the church, hoping to gather more information about Kunle's true nature. Over the next few weeks, they heard stories of his past, a pattern of deceit that had followed him from village to village, like a shadow lurking just behind him. The evidence began to pile up, and with it, their courage grew. Hadassah could feel the tide shifting. They were no longer just victims, they were warriors ready to reclaim their lives. The bond among them deepened as they leaned on one another for strength, support, and validation. One night, they decided to meet. Hadassah looked around at her friends, their faces illuminated by the moonlight. Tomorrow, we confront him. We can't wait any longer. We owe it to ourselves and to every girl he has deceived. The others agreed. They knew it wouldn't be easy, but they felt empowered. They were ready to face the man who had taken so much from them. The following day, Hadassah and her friends arrived at the church. Their hearts were pounding. They had summed up courage to confront the pastor, armed with their testimonies and documentation. There was tension in the air as they stepped into the church. Pastor Kunle was at the altar, backing the chairs. He turned, with a wide stretching smile across his face. "Ah, my beloved sisters, what brings you here today?" Hadassah stepped forward. "Pastor Kunle, we need to talk. We know you have been deceiving and sleeping with the young women in this village." His expression shifted with a flicker of annoyance before he masked it with a faint surprise. "What do you mean? I am merely a servant of God, guiding you all to your blessings." But Hadassah pressed on. "You've manipulated us, used our trust against us. You promised fame and fortune, but all we've received is shame and fear." She held up her notes, her hands trembling slightly but determined. The pastor's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing. "You misunderstand my intentions. I have only ever wanted to help you." The atmosphere became more tensed. The other women began to chime in, sharing their stories, their voices rising in a chorus of truth. He denied every confession the girls made. He could feel his facade crumbling, the power he had held over them slipping away. "You will regret this," he shouted, his voice booming through the church. "I have power to destroy you." But Hadassah stood. "You may try, but we will not be silenced anymore. We have evidence, and we will go to the village elders if you don't stop your lies." The confrontation reached its peak, and Kunle, realizing he was losing control, stormed out of the church. The young women exchanged glances. They had taken a monumental step, but the battle was far from over. The confrontation spread throughout Umokwe, and soon the village was abuzz with whispers and rumors about the pastor's true intentions. Hadassah and her friends reported to the village elders. Hadassah spoke passionately, recounting their experiences with Pastor Kunle. She shared the evidences they had gathered, detailing the manipulation and deceit that had plagued their community. The elders listened intently. When Hadassah finished, one of the elders spoke. "We have known of the pastor's arrival and his charm, but we had not seen the harm he was causing. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We will investigate this matter further." The young women were hopeful. Finally, they were being heard. With the elders on their side, they could now challenge Pastor Kunle's influence over the village. As the investigation went on, more women came forward sharing their stories and experiences. The collective strength of their voices grew, and with it, the village began to awaken to the truth. The village meeting was called, and a large crowd gathered to hear the findings of the elders. Hadassah and her friends stood at the front, expectant of what the elders had to share. They had waited for this moment, where the man who had deceived the young women would be exposed. As the elders shared their findings, the crowd murmured. The villagers had just confirmed the rumors they had heard about the pastor's manipulation. The villagers that once regarded him now looked at him in disdain. Then the elders turned to Hadassah and her friends, inviting them to share their testimonies in the open. One by one they spoke, recounting their experiences and the grip of fear that held them hostage for so long. Pastor Kunle, who stood at the back, realized that he was losing his hold over the village as he listened to the young women share their truth. The villagers began to turn against him. The young men of the village angrily moved towards him. One gave him a sounding slap, while the others pushed him to the ground and rolled him like a bag of sand. He was rolled to the outskirts of the village. Some other young men of the village went to his private quarters in the church and brought out all his belongings. They threw it at him at the outskirts of the village as he was being rolled outside of the village. He left in shame and as a disappointment to himself and the entire village. The village of Umwekwe emerged stronger, united by the truth. The young ladies learned their lessons, never to fully trust a stranger anymore and never to follow false gospel. All right, so what did you learn from this story? Share it in the comment section. And please subscribe to this channel right now and turn on post notification so that whenever a story is posted, you'll be the first to get notified and you'll be the first to watch. Like and share this. Don't forget to drop your lessons in the comment section. Subscribe and see you in our next story. Bye bye.